I'm David Ainsworth, Head of Communications at the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Our Substa 26 Biodiversity Beat interview today is with Andy Gonzalez, who's the co-chair of GeoBon. Andy, welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
So can you unpack, actually, it's an acronym, and I shouldn't do this, so what does GeoBon stand for?
It stands for the Group on Earth Observations Biodiversity Observation Network.
Great, great. Okay, so when I hear that, and that's what our questions are about today, is about monitoring and observations. So can you give to our viewers, what is the monitoring framework for the framework, and how does it support the framework?
Yeah, so the monitoring framework is this essential piece of the overarching global biodiversity framework, which is vital to the process of assessing progress towards the goals and targets. It is a document that provides guidelines on how to monitor the state of nature, but also how to use an array of indicators, headline, component, complementary, and now binary indicators that the countries can use when they're reporting on their progress to the Secretariat of the CBD.
Okay, great. So they're negotiating a lot of these things. Well, not just here, they've been doing it for some time. Maybe one thing to unpack, people are talking about binary indicators. What are these binary indicators before I go on to my next round of questioning?
Yeah, so the binary indicators were initially thought of as a way of filling some gaps in terms of understanding how countries are deploying policies and actions on the ground. So a country might, for example, target 12 on urban biodiversity and ecosystem services. The binary indicator says, does your country have policies for urban planning that are biodiversity inclusive?
Right.
That would be an example of a binary indicator, and they'd say yes, no, or partially, and then you get an answer to that.
Okay, great. I'll say. So now part of the question we have too is, so we've got this monitoring framework. So why is the biodiversity science community engaging in this framework through organizations such as yours? Because GeoBon is really strongly, intimately involved in this framework. Yeah.
So the monitoring framework is like a coin with two sides. On one side, we've got the indicators, and you've got the sort of the reporting process that the parties are required to do. And on the other side of the coin, you have the monitoring science, where the science community contributes understanding of how to go out into nature and measure how it's changing. How are species coming and going? Is there extinction happening? Are we recovering species? The functioning of ecosystems and the benefits we get from those ecosystems. That requires measurements on the ground done by people, sometimes with camera traps, but also from space with satellites. And there's a revolution in the suite of technologies that we can deploy to measure the pulse of the planet, if you like, the pulse of nature. But right now there's a bit of a disconnect between the science community that's developing these technologies and the reporting process of the monitoring framework. And what we are trying to do, what GeoBon is trying to do, is bridge that, offering some advice on how countries can grow their capacity to monitor nature, and then feed that information into the indicators that then allow us to assess progress. So we're trying to join the dots between the science, the monitoring, the data, and the information tools that we need to then reliably, rigorously, just and fairly reporting on the progress.
So as you're doing that, what are some of the key activities that you're doing, but then also where are the real challenges in achieving this connection of the dots?
There are very real challenges. The first of them is that countries differ significantly in their ability to mobilize these technologies. Some of them are very costly. Some of them involve sophisticated information technologies. It's not just a database, but how do you link databases to models, statistical models that allow you to infer whether changes happened? Do you have access to remote sensing technologies from space or from drones or whatever, or environmental DNA, for example? So how do you bring all that information together? How do you coalesce all that knowledge, including indigenous knowledge and local communities that have themselves a range of indicators that describe how nature is changing? How do you sort of weave that understanding together and then apply this systematic process to the indicators, right? So it's connecting all that richness of understanding of how nature is changing to the more formal COP process of reporting progress. So the countries are inequitable. So what we want in terms of their ability to mobilize that knowledge. So what GeoBon is doing, GeoBon is an international network with 3,000 members in 150 countries. The idea is that if we cooperate and collaborate on mobilizing that knowledge, the monitoring science, will lift everybody together so that every country can have that minimum requirement of the monitoring know-how and science, so that by 2030 maybe we'll all be at this, we'll have this humming system or this monitoring framework where the science is linked to the reporting.
Right, okay. Well, it's good timing for this because countries will be revising their biodiversity strategies and action plans, coming up with their national targets. Absolutely. And so I'm imagining that you're aligning to a certain extent with that or taking that into account.
That's exactly what we're trying to do. Right now there's a bit of a disconnect between the information that's being produced by the research community, by NGOs, by local communities, and how that knowledge sort of filters through into the indicators. So every country is not only developing its NBSAP, but it's developing its domestic or national monitoring framework. So it's choosing from that long list of indicators which ones match to their aspirations and the targets, and then calling upon the research community and the NGO community to say, hey, help us with the measurement of these indicators. Help us assess our progress. We know it's going to be a long journey, right? Ecosystems take decades to recover. We're going to have to plan for connectivity, restoration of our ecosystems, protect our populations. It's a multi-dimensional challenge. So what we're proposing in Geobon is a solution that our climate colleagues have, who've been working on this for decades. Our climate colleagues have something called the Global Climate Observing System, which is all countries under the UNFCCC agreeing on how to monitor and mobilize this knowledge. It's called the Global Climate Observing System. It's a way of creating collaboration among countries to share climate observations and weather observations. The fact that your phone has an app that tells you what the weather is going to be is by virtue of the fact they're all sharing their weather observations daily. 2 billion observations per day are being shared among countries across the world. So now imagine a global biodiversity observing system that is helping countries with their technical capacities, sharing knowledge and data among countries, say within certain regions, for example, Southeast Asia or the Africa region or Northern Europe. We're all working to share this vital piece of knowledge, but doing so in a way that's much more than the sum of its parts. My hope is that within a decade we've built this global biodiversity observing system that will allow us to achieve those ambitious expectations and goals of the GBF.
Well, that's great. Okay, well, this journey we're on, it sounds excellent. So we'll let you continue work here, and let's talk at COP16 and see how things are going now.
It's a date. I can look forward to it.
Perfect.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, Andy.